What's up, friends? Today we're looking at the 5 levels of ambient vocal from beginner to legendary. These tips are really going to help you craft the right kind of ambience for your chosen genre. I think level 3 and level 4 truly get so creative and exciting, but we need to start at the beginning, level 1. Let's dive into it. At level 1, we have the basics of creating an ambient vocal, and I'm sure you've seen this recently too. You take a section of the vocal that you like, and we're just going to fade it in and fade it out and possibly stretch this out as well. So we need to warp our sample and then hold shift and stretch this vocal right out. And we get kind of an elongated version of that vocal chop that we have. If we want to create some kind of drone, then of course we can come up to the top of the clip, press Command D and duplicate versions of this vocal sample, highlight the entire region, press Command Option and F, which will then create tiny little fades which hides any clicks or pops. But as you can tell, this vocal is quite buzzy, so you might hide that with reverb. But before you do, what I would suggest is continuing to highlight these regions, come down to your warp modes, and instead of choosing Complex Pro like it's suggested in some videos, I would lean more towards texture. With texture, you can choose the grain size and the flux, essentially determining how much randomness there is in the grains of the sample, which creates more of a humanistic feel. Then what I'd suggest is add an EQ, then your reverb of choice. Up that decay, and now with the EQ, you can kind of modulate that drone throughout your piece of music. Let's take off the extreme lows and then play with the filter. In context, it sounds like this. Level 2 is where I see most beat makers' creativity stop. I think it's the most basic way to create a looping vocal, and I think it gets really exciting at level 3 and level 4. But if you're new here, let's check out how we can create a very basic looping vocal. We've got a new vocal here. And there's plenty of areas where you can find a looping point. So what I'm going to do is press Shift Command T to bring up a new MIDI track and drag that sample down into that new MIDI area. This creates a simpler device. As you've probably seen in other videos, we're going to select loop and then we're going to up our fade to 100%. From here, you can increase your start point and then your length to find your loop-in region. Then by either drawing a long MIDI C note in the piano roll or holding C on your MIDI keyboard, we can dial in that loop point. That works pretty good. We'll dial in our length. I think that works pretty well, but here's where the creativity is kind of limited. If we play a lower C, that sample obviously moves quite slowly. And if we play a higher C, it's going to move quite quickly. This introduces some interesting textures to which we can of course play chords. And if we fade in the attack and up the release, we can have something that sounds a little bit more like a pad. But if we had stretched out our vocal further, and then dropped it into the simpler, we would probably want to use the warp modes, whether it be texture or complex pro. Once we hit warp, we lose our ability to fade. Now our sample sounds like this. It has that annoying click there. Even when we go to texture and mess with our grain size and our flux position, we still have a little bit of a click there. And this is only amplified when we play chords. For that reason, let's excitingly skip to level 3. For this example, we use the same vocal, but we're going to right-click the simpler and swap it to the sampler. Now things are going to get really exciting. If you haven't already edited the simpler and switched it to the sampler, then you'll get something that looks like this. In the sustain mode, we can choose which direction the sample moves. I like to go forwards and backwards, which creates a more smooth, modulative looping point. We can choose our loop point by selecting this bracket, dragging it to where we would like the loop to start. And the same goes for the end of the loop. I'm going to set this playhead really close to that loop point. You can hear that we still get a click. So with snap turned on, we're going to make sure that we up our crossfade. And you'll start to see that just like before, we create these faded regions. And we can create something that feels a little bit more human as we edit this looped region. So then inside filter and global settings, I can up my attack and my release once again, and then come down to voices and set it to the max. Here's where I create more of a pad-like sound. Now, of course, if I ended things there, level 3 would be a little bit dull. So let's crank up the difficulty. We're going to come over to modulation, turn off LFO1, and turn on LFO2 so that we can activate the A and B boxes. Under type, we're going to set things to sawtooth up, and for now, turn our frequency up to 30 Hertz. Under A, we're going to set this to loop start, and turn this up to 100. Now, as you play your sample, it's going to look a little bit more like a granular synth, which can introduce some really wonderful pitches and textures depending on what your sample source is. I like to dial back the loop length now to find some really unique variations of this looping vocal. So to do this, I'm going to zoom in on my vocal, reduce the loop length, and set that really close to the playhead. I'm going to come over to modulation and start to dial back from 100 until I have something that is in the same pitch. Obviously, if you've got a longer, singular pitched vocal, then this is going to work better. I've got a lot of variation in pitches in my long sample. So I'm going to start to dial this back. And you can see at 4.48, it's not flicking through the entire vocal, but just this region, but creates a lot of variation. We can dial back some of the jitteriness of this sound by going over to modulation and pulling back the frequency. And then I like to take my reverb and put it on ascend alongside a filtered delay with ping pong turned on. If we up that decay as we did before, and then send this sampler instrument to our return A, now we get something that sounds like this. In context, that sounds like this. Now you may have noticed that that sampler instrument became a little bit more granular in level 3. Well, in level 4, why don't we actually use a granulator? I'm going to start by resampling that same vocal onto a new channel. I'm going to take the start of this vocal tail at the beginning here. And I love that breath that's at the end as well. For that reason, I'm going to stretch out the vocal a little bit and the breath independently. And then from there, I'll consolidate that region. Now I'm going to add a ton of reverb. I'm going to choose that dark hall preset, maybe up the high cut a little bit, really up my decay for many, many seconds, pull down my size a little bit, and create a new track. Command T to create a new track if you're on Mac, set it to resample, and then record in. We get this lovely reverbious sound, and we get the breath in there as well. Once we stop recording, we can hit R on this sample to reverse it and Command J to consolidate it once again. We're going to hit Shift Command T to bring open a new MIDI track and grab the Granulator 3. This is in Live 12 Suite. Now on this track, we can drag in the granulator. As you move the playhead position through the granulator whilst holding middle C, you'll get something like this. This is great for melodies, but as you can tell, the playhead's going really, really quickly. So what we want to do is slow that down and add some modulation. So from here, what I like to do is set our grain mode to either loop, where we're able to change the grains to reverse grains. To do that, we come over to grain size, and then where it says reverse, we up this to 100%. Now when we play C, you'll see that our grains are going in the reverse position. Now, if we up scan, we'll also be playing forward, but our grains will be going backwards. Upping our grain size will, of course, increase the box in which we create our loop. and we can create some different patterns that way. But I also like to use cloud, and the reason for that is we can create many variations of pitch of our grains. We lose the ability to have reversing grains, as you can see by this grayed out region here. But if we come over to variation, we can up our pitch variation and how many grains as well. If you were to set this to 24 and you were to up your grains a little and increase your variation here, you would get something like this. It's quite a lot of pitch variation there. So I'm going to set this really low, something under 0.50%, take my grains down a little bit and keep that variation fairly low. I also want this to be able to move through the sample. So I'm going to grab an LFO from modulators, turn map off and map the position. That's moving way too quick right now. So our left percentage, that's going to come up until I'm happy with its furthest left position. And then the right position, I'm going to pull that down. So maybe something around 50 and 40. It's moving quite nicely. And then I can take that rate way down. Now as I play middle C, I get this kind of sweeping, modulating sound. I'm going to bring my scan down a little bit because that's moving just a bit far ahead of the playhead here, and also bring my grain size down. We can also change our grain size over time, which gives you this really cool effect. This works really lovely when you put your chosen reverb on a return track. So I'm going to pull this concert hall onto return A, keep the dry wet at 100% and up that decay. Now increase your reverb send, and you can sweep through this vocal sample. Coming over to the control view, you can set your envelope to up that attack once again and up that release once again so that you can create pads. Watch how this effect changes as we swap out for some different samples. Oh, that reminds me, this episode is sponsored by DistroKid. I release all of my music on DistroKid. I truly think it's the easiest, most hands-off way to get your music on hundreds of streaming platforms, as well as market your music and take care of any playlisting that you need to do through their Playlister tool. I've just released a cover song, which is kind of an ambient remix, and they took care of my cover licenses as well. All you have to do is pay one fee and you get to keep 100% of your royalties. So there's discounts in the description below. Let's get back to the video. At level 5, this is where I get truly creative. Check out this vocal line. It's kind of R&B. I want to set a formant first. So we're going to come over to auto shift. So I'm going to grab auto shift and I'm just going to elongate this first part of the vocal. So I think we'll take this end part, reverse it, and then we get something like this. That'll create a lovely loop. What I want to do is start to twist and turn the formant of this vocal. I'm going to start at like 30% and then work down to minus 30%. And I'll always be there for you. It's crazy how much I do. And everything that you do. On return A, we're going to add hall reverb as we did before. We're going to up that decay, but we're also going to add a grain delay. With the grain delay, we're going to turn our spray up a little bit and our pitch up to 12. Taking our frequency all the way down and keeping our feedback at around 50%. And because it's on a send, we're going to keep our dry wet at 100%. But I'd like to add an align delay. The align delay is going to make sure that all of these lovely grains and reverb is really, really wide, whilst our sample is kind of kept in the center. So anywhere between 7 and 40 milliseconds sounds kind of like the sweet spot. I also like to EQ this a little bit so it's not too harsh. Now we can send odd tails of the vocal to this delay send. So I'm going to choose kind of areas in which I want to send a little bit of the bubbling delays. Some parts will be louder than others. And let's add a different type of reverb to the stem itself. I'm going to up that decay and bring that size down. Keep that dry wet under 50%. So as I've done before, Command T to create a new audio track and then set that to resampling. And I'm going to resample this audio onto a new track so that I can really make it ambient. So we've created all of these different harmonious moving parts, but the vocal isn't quite ambient just yet. In last week's video, I showed you how you can use a free tool called Pull Stretch. Check that out in the top right if you want the best settings. And I showed you how you can create a rack out of that free Pull Stretch device as well. If you want to skip the queue, it's available over at my Patreon, alongside the best sounds that you can use to resample into Pull Stretch, including vocals, kind of strings, and odd kind of plucked metallophone sounds as well. So if you're using the Pull Stretch device, then you can capture up here. As I mentioned, I give a full breakdown over at the other video. If you're using the HC Dream Engine at the Patreon, then you just hit capture. So we're going to play this, and we're going to capture it inside Pull Stretch here. When it loops over, we're going to turn that capture off. Wonderful. So now we've got this 10-second vocal with lots of textures in it. So once again, I'm going to create a new track that I can resample onto and play that sound out of Pull Stretch, seeing how much I can stretch and smear the vocal in a harmonically ambient way. Let's see. Let's bring up the reverb here. Ooh, a little bit of tape wobble. And maybe bring down that filter a little bit. How gorgeous is that? There are hints of a vocal in there, but it's truly ambient. And because we're recording it onto this resample track, once we've finished recording, we can chop it up and utilize levels 2, 3, 4 to create new vocal chops that sound ambient and distant in our music. That sounds like this. Does that last example remind you of anybody in particular? Let me know in the comments, as well as what your favorite ambient vocal techniques are, so we can help the community grow. If this video was helpful in any way, please do like and subscribe, as we're well on our way to 100,000 subscribers. This week at the Patreon, you can download the HC Dream Engine, which is essentially the Pull Stretch rack device for Ableton, alongside the textures that I think work best with the device, and some of these examples that I've played throughout the video, so you can dive straight into those projects and use them as templates in your own work. As always, thank you so much for swinging by, and I'll catch you next time.